And that doesn't necessarily diminish the greatness of your guru. For example, your guru might be really, really good in one or two facets or a cluster of facets, but still be missing some other one. See? There can be trade-offs between depth and level of mastery versus breadth. See? So just keep that in mind. After all, how do you know which specific facets your guru has realized? Have you sat down with your guru and asked them to check off this entire matrix of facets? Of course not. Most gurus wouldn't allow you to do that anyways. Even if you asked, they would hand wave you away and just tell you to do their technique. They're not going to sit there and argue with you about all these different facets. And for you as a newbie, how are you going to know to discuss these facets with your guru? You won't know. You won't even know which questions to ask them. You won't know whether they're giving you valid, legitimate answers or not. You won't know when they're dismissing your question because it's a bad question or because they're actually ignorant of the answer. Gurus can be sneaky this way. A lot of times they'll ignore a good question and blame you for being ignorant or being too nosy or something like that, when actually they're hiding their own ignorance. It's very difficult to know the degree of understanding that some guru has. And most followers, it never even occurs to them to ask or to question, what does their guru really understand? Few gurus tell you everything they understand. So this means you have to take responsibility. You have to be careful. Don't just make blanket assumptions about people. Don't assume that all awakenings are the same. Don't assume that all gurus are equally enlightened. Don't assume that all paths lead to the same destination in this work. If awakening was simple and binary, there wouldn't be so much disagreement between different schools and teachers and gurus. How do we explain this disagreement? Clearly, these disagreements exist, and they have existed throughout all of human history across all continents. So this can't just be something I'm making up. Clearly, there is a vast variety of spiritual teachings and techniques. What are the chances that every single technique would hit and be equally effective at reaching every insight and every facet that there is? Very little chance that they're all perfectly equal. Chances are that certain techniques hit certain facets better than others. See? Certain teachings are deeper than others. Certain teachings are broader than others. There really isn't one state or one insight that all awakened people reach. That's a mistaken assumption. Which is why it's wise to play various gurus off one another. You can do that. You can actually spot contradictions between gurus this way. Take one great guru from the East, take one great guru from the West, then, read their books, and then take the sayings of this one and direct it at this guy, and take the sayings of this guy and direct it at this guy, and you'll see that there's going to be a conflict between the two. And how do we explain this? Well, I explain it that they have different depths and different facets. That's how I explain it. Beware that partial realizations can be dangerous. For example, you can have partial awakening where you fail to realize love. Absolute love. And then your teachings will lack love. And that will be a problem. Or a shame, really, to have a teaching of awakening without the love component. Or you can teach awakening but still deny God. For example, Sam Harris has some bit of awakening, but not that deep, not that broad. He talks about no self. He's done various kinds of Buddhist meditation for years. Supposedly he's a pretty good meditator and so forth, but he doesn't know what God is. He's not conscious of that. He's in denial about God. And so in this sense, he's misleading his students. That's a great shame, especially because he's God. What is the point of being awake when you don't realize you're God? That's not full awakening. Or for example, you can have various other kinds of teachers who awaken in some way, but their teaching is kind of nihilistic. That's also limited and problematic in my opinion. You can have a partial realization, but then your ego can still hang on and it can create fear and rejection of this realization that you've had, and then that can spin off into some sort of distorted direction. Or you can have some deep realization and insight, but then you can dismiss other valid teachings from different traditions and different paths. For example, some student comes to you practicing the path of love, but you dismiss them and you tell them to stop because you tell them that love is bullshit and that it's not right, because your path was a path of like hardcore fucking meditation or strong determination sitting, and then you want the student to follow your path without realizing that your path isn't necessarily going to work for her or for him. See? And you might dismiss some yogic technique because it doesn't fit in with your ideas of how to do self-inquiry. Well, self-inquiry is just one way to do it. Yoga is another way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to do yoga. And many more spiritual techniques besides those two. See? So partial realizations lead to these various kinds of conflicts because, yeah, it's partial. From a partial perspective, you misunderstand other perspectives. That's the whole problem with partial perspectives. Another objection that arises is, but Leo, if awakening has all these facets you talk about, doesn't that contradict the most important point, which is the oneness of truth, the oneness of reality? It's a good question, and the answer is no, it doesn't contradict, because actually the distinction between oneness and manyness is itself something that must collapse into a higher, greater absolute oneness. You see? So manyness is not the opposite of oneness. Really, you have to realize they're the same thing. Which is why I call them facets. The metaphor in my mind is that of a jewel or a diamond. A diamond is one thing that has many facets. That's exactly how it works. Or the classic, Hindu metaphor of the elephant, the 5 blind men and the elephant. That's what we're talking about here. The elephant is enlightenment or truth, and each blind man is groping a different part. So, what's true? Is the elephant one thing, or is the elephant a collection of things, like a tail, a foot, an ear, a tusk, a trunk, and whatever else it has on it? It's both. See, my hand is one, but it also is 5 fingers. You might say that the fingers are different facets of my hand. I can know each finger individually, or I can know them all together collectively. Each way of knowing is important. It's important to know them all collectively because it would be a problem if I denied that I have a thumb, let's say. See, I would be dysfunctional if I had to deny to myself that I have a thumb. But also it would be a problem if all I knew is my thumb, and I knew it really close, and I knew all the intimate details and wrinkles of my thumb and all the scars that are on it, but then I didn't use it holistically in sync with all the other fingers of my hand so that I could use it as an actual hand. I would be too preoccupied with the thumb, and then I'd be pushing stuff with my thumb all the time, and the only way I'd be interacting with the world is with my thumb, and I would ignore the other possibilities of my hand. You see, that's what's going on here. So what I'm about, what Actualize Org is about, is learning how to use the whole hand holistically, but also taking interest in individual aspects as well. right? So we need to be able to zoom in and zoom out, be sometimes specific and limited, and sometimes holistic and very broad.